In my life, I've taken many different approaches, and to discover what my true life work is, which is belonging, it has taken many routes to end up at one destination. I think the first route that made me realize that belonging was my life work was growing up inside of a community where I didn't really feel like I belonged. I was short, and that's why I'm sitting on a tall stool, so that I can look tall in the camera, but really I'm 5'5". But not only was I short, and I know you really can't tell this right now, is I wasn't always this attractive. Now that I'm this height and this attractive, it's really easy, but I was funny looking growing up. And being funny looking caused me to be excluded. It caused me to be ostracized. People didn't want to be my friend because of the way that I looked. And so I dealt with exclusion very early in my life. Probably around the first or the second grade is when I really started to experience exclusion. But I didn't have a term for it back then. All I know is that I didn't fit in with the in crowd. And then after that, as I began to grow and develop, my looks didn't change, but my attitude did. And my attitude started saying things like, "You don't like me, so what?" So I then built a persona that pretended I didn't care, but on the inside, I really did. But through the process, as I got older, things began to shift, and I became an educator. And when I first started teaching in education, we had two goals, and that was bigger. One was bigger, and the other was to increase scores. If we've been doing this the last 20, 30, 40 years, and there's still 5, 6, 7 years below, something that we're doing is not working. So I had a new approach, and that approach was community over content. I started to build the right community, put in place the right structure, so that when my students came to work or school every day, I created an environment where they knew that they belonged, not felt like they belonged. And I tell CEOs this all of the time. Stop spending your money on a feeling, on an emotion. I want my employees to feel like they belong. That's very expensive because there are a lot of emotions in the workplace. It's far less expensive to create an environment where they know that they belong. And so this was simple in my classroom. I started thinking outside of what we would call the box. And I said, if my students are hungry, how can they learn English? Because English is not their first concern. Their first concern is nourishment, putting something on their stomach. So I did all of those necessary steps, but the one that caused the most bang for my buck, so to speak, is when I stopped and I first had family reunions every morning. A family reunion is when I would put my students in a circle and I would express to them how I was feeling that particular day or what happened yesterday after I went home since the last time we saw one another. And then we would go around the room and everyone had to share. It was a family reunion. At first it was awkward. At first my students didn't want to open up and reveal. But the more I revealed of myself, the more they were open. And the more we did it, the more comfortable they got. See, there's something called give to get. I found out that people will give you anything if you first give what you're asking first. So I had to give of myself and tell my story in order for them to give of themselves and tell their stories. I wanted to create an environment where they knew that working with me was relational and not transactional. And when I did that, light bulbs started to go off in my students' head. And I knew at that moment that I was onto something. And at the end of the year, I had 92% gains because I built the right culture. I invested in futures, not the futures of a Fortune 500, but the futures of the people who were sitting in front of me. After that, I discovered that this is something very valuable. And I set out on a mission, a cause, so to speak. And that cause is to end workplace exclusion. And that's how I created a culture of belonging. I was doing this work for many, many years as a public school teacher. I was doing this work after being a public school teacher, and it was called DEI. But the very nature of those three letters were turning people off for whatever reason. But when I started talking about this culture of belonging, when I talked about building spaces that unlock human potential, when I talked about creating an environment where people, profits, and productivity are all maximized, I knew that this was my life work and that I had been doing it a very long time. And so my challenge to you is to not only create a culture of belonging and end workplace exclusion, my challenge to you is to find out what you can unlock by what you're already doing. My name is Curtis Ray Hill, and if you like these tips, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.